what do you feel the devil is doing right now? And then maybe too a little bit about what can we do? So can you give us a take on what you believe is going on with the devil right now, Father?
I think he's using people quite a bit. I think that's the principal difficulty that we have. People who are, for lack of a better way of putting it, they're basically in league with him. They actually believe the same things that he does. They want the same goals. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but I actually did it was like a 40 or 50 part series on communism and how its psychology is identical to diabolic psychology. And I think what we're seeing is there's some stark comparisons that sometimes when I see the behavior of some of these people, that it's what I've seen in session, So, for example, right now things are kind of leading up to a crescendo, and that's what you tend to see right before the person's liberated. So there's this buildup of the diabolic manifestations, which come much more drastic, much more open, much more out there, sometimes even more preternatural right towards the end, and then the person's actually liberated. But you'll see the two characteristics of the diabolic is that. But I think the other thing you're seeing is that once Satan thinks he has the upper hand, he presses it all the more. He doesn't wait. He doesn't take his time. He will, in certain circumstances, take his time. But once he thinks he has control over a situation, he's going to drive it until he gets ultimately what he wants. I think that ultimately what he's doing is he's using people who are not leading morally good lives themselves. I think that a lot of them, as I mentioned, believe the same thing that he believes. And I think that that's slowly starting to come out. I mean, when you look at some of the stuff that was revealed before the election, and even some of the things that, are generally available on the internet, and some of these things are, on public record about the behavior of some of the people that have been the most vociferous during this time frame. It reminds me a lot of how the demons themselves would, when they get caught in something, or when their shame is revealed about the sin that they've committed, they sometimes become very vociferous and very angry about it, and try and push the envelope even more. They also do the typical thing. I mean, there's so many comparisons. They do the thing of once their sin is revealed and people see it, then what they'll do is they try and create a distraction in something else. So one of the things that exorcists have to constantly be on the guard about during session is when you start getting a certain point where the demons actually, you're starting to gain certain control over them, or you're starting to get somewhere in a session where it looks like he's going to start telling you some information. He'll actually start doing things in order to distract you, or he'll dig into the person psychologically that's possessed so that it's very hard to get to them. And there's even a stage called the external phase in liberation, in the 6 stages of liberation, where the demons, once they start losing control over the interior battle, which is very similar to what we kind of started to see in this country, where some of the people, call them deep state, call them whatever you want, or even people that are just communists and pushing for communism and things of that sort. Once they got into a position of it looked like they were going to slowly get to the point where they were losing control. It was very possible for them to end up losing control. They moved to, in cases of possession, they moved to what they call the external phase. That's the stuff you see in movies where things are going around and around and around in the inside the room. Although that's very rare, it actually does do that. Or they'll start blow out the candles, or they'll blow out the lights, or whatever have you. And it's to distract everybody on the outside once they've started to lose control on the inside. The other thing is, it's very common is claiming that they're victorious, or that they've already won, when they really haven't yet. It hasn't been proven to actually be the case, or that they actually have rights, or that there's certain things that they have that other people, that the other people can't take away from them, etc. So it's very similar to a lot of the things that we're actually seeing. So I think we're seeing that on their side. I think on the side of those who are on the side of the angels, so to speak, who actually want what's best for this country, I think that this is just some basic external observations, and stop me if I'm going on too long.
No,
but
it's great.
I think there is a kind of a in the minds of people, there's a feeling of vulnerability right now. And the reason I say vulnerability is because people recognize that the checks and balance system in our country has essentially broken down.
Right.
And the checks and balances meaning that people in one part of the government are just doing whatever they want or legislating when it's not their place to legislate. We saw that actually with COVID, where you actually had mayors setting aside constitutional rights of the citizens. So the actual checks and balances system are broken down. There's also kind of a slow burn with people in the sense that people are angry at systemic crime. I mean, people are just certain families and things of that sort who are just systematically getting away with crime year after year, and nothing's ever done about it. How much evidence do you actually need? I mean, when the public sector knows 10 times more than what people get convicted for in court, you're wondering, like, what's it going to take for certain people to actually end up being put away for their crimes, especially when the crimes have caused tremendous damage, which basically involve treason, selling out the country, and things of that sort. This is also why many believe that even if the fraud is exposed and all of this comes out in this whole process, that some people have actually expressed they're not convinced that the Supreme Court would actually end up ruling in favor of what's right. Now, historically, they've gone both ways. What they did with LBJ, they basically acknowledged that the guy committed fraud, but they still gave him the election. And then you've got the, if I understand my history correctly, and then you've got the Al Gore situation, which they actually did adjudicate appropriately, so it seems. And so I think that there's people that are concerned that there's not going to be a consistent or a reliable judgment, even from the Supreme Court, even with the new people that we have on it. That's just kind of my general take. But I think that demoralization is precisely what you see when demons are attacking people. One of the things that we have to do with people who are possessed is constantly get their focus back on God. Don't let the demons drag your focus into, the stuff that you're suffering and the things that you're dealing with. Keep your focus, because that's when things start going downhill. It's also it's also one of those things that the shift in the focus is what the demons are always trying to get us to do, and to be demoralized. In the ritual, you actually ask for the time and date of departure of the demon. Now, I don't stress that too much, and neither does Father Bamonte, who's in Rome, if I'm not mistaken, and neither did Father Amorth, God, and may he rest in peace. But he did. We didn't. I found that what they do is they try and set you up like you're going to win, or that this is the day in which the liberation is going to occur. The day comes and goes, and it doesn't happen, and so the person gets demoralized. And that's why I always tell them, well, first of all, demons are liars, so never presume that when they tell you those things that it's actually going to happen on that day. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Our job is just to keep grinding it out. And I think that's my concern is that people on our side, the way the demons are, they're using the people on the other side to attack us and to make us feel demoralized, like they've won, it's all, and what I think ultimately on the side of demons, it's about distracting us from our focus. I think that's what it ultimately boils down to.
Now, Father, early on as you were explaining that was phenomenal, and your assessment of the entire situation in comparison to what's happening right now in our country and other parts of the world. But you mentioned something I want to just touch base on again, is that they get angry, that there's a reaction from the demons when we respond to God's grace and start to rise up in prayer and so forth. I mean,
right.
Can you kind of detail that a bit more about that we are in the thick of a battle, that it's not like they're inanimate kind of robotic beings that are tempting us, but there's an actual, if I'm understanding this intelligence, there's a response to them that's coming from them, and they get more angry when we rise up in unity of prayer and so forth. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it is. And there's two parts to St. Thomas defines anger as a complex passion in which there's perception of injury with a desire for vindication. Now, one of the things, and this is what we've actually seen in certain segments of our population, like in the mainstream media and the like, they take everything personal. Everything is personal. That's the way demons function. Literally, you can't have any interchange with them they don't take personally. And that basically boils down to the fact that it was kind of interesting because on the communism series that I did on YouTube, they one woman says, well, it sounds to me like they suffer from narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much a description of demons. And yeah, that's pretty much a description of communists.
Yeah.
But I think that the reason I'm going into that is because they easily perceive any injury whatsoever. And here, that's one of the things that we saw with the rioting and things like that. It was all perceived. There's a lot of this stuff wasn't even real, or there wasn't, if you looked at the actual facts of cases which they were rioting over and things like that, they weren't in the right in doing so. But St. Thomas says, so once a person perceives the injury, then he says they try and mete out vindication against the person to cause them to stop hurting us. Right. So when we get angry, someone hurts us, we hurt them in order to not hurt us. And he says that's the structure of anger. And I think that's what we're actually saying. So on the side of the demons, when we rise up in prayer, that means that God will answer their prayers. I mean, one of the beauties of being an exorcist is you literally see the effect of your prayers. When you ask God the Father, punish him for doing X, you immediately see God physically punishing this demon for what he's actually doing. So there's a certain sense in which you realize God is right there. He's listening to everything that you say. You just have to be very persistent. But the demons know that if you are praying, that means that what they are working towards will get stripped from them. And that's why they get so angry. And I think that's one of the things that you actually, and they get really irritated just by virtue of the fact that you're even fighting against them. Their basic attitude is you should just step aside and I should get what I want. Yep. Which I'm sure sounds very familiar out there.
Yeah, sit down and shut up is what I've been saying.
They're being bullied. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And that's what demons like to do. They like to bully, but they are typical bullies, just like these other people are. Once you rise up against them, they're basically cowards and they flee, right? So, but I think that, this is one of the things I mentioned too, that, you know, certain people within our culture have debilitated the police to where they can't function, so they can't subdue people in a rightly ordered fashion in order to establish law and peace and order. And that's exactly what the demon's trying to do, is actually try to debilitate you or set up a situation where you feel you can't go after them because what you're fighting against seems almost insurmountable. And so that's because a lot of times people who are possessed will say, Father, I can't do this. I can't fight this. You know, I can't make it to the end. And my answer is always the same. No, you can't. But with God, you can. And that's the thing that the demons constantly just shift your focus away from God and onto your troubles, the magnitude of them and things of that, rather than keeping your focus on him and doing what you need to do to actually win the battle. So I think that's my concern, is that a lot of people, I saw this at least for the first couple of days after it looked like Joe Biden was going to win. A lot of the people on the right just got demoralized. It was like they deflated and they almost gave up, like right off the bat. So, and you know, if I may make the comparison, it's a bit of a long comparison, but you know, bear with me. This whole situation with Trump reminds me very much like the situation that Joan of Arc suffered in her life. So one of the things that I learned in dealing with Satan in a particular case is that when he is the demon of delay, now this is very interesting, when he delays things, he does so in order to slow things down so that other things can be put in place, because his goal is to block the process. So he's a demon of delay. His nemesis when it comes to when he's a demon of delay, is Joan of Arc. Now, obviously, Our Lady's always his nemesis in a variety of different ways, but when it comes to when he delays things, it's Saint Joan of Arc. So if you go back and read like the Rehabilitation Trials, or you can read Mark Twain's book on Joan of Arc, which is actually so close to the Rehabilitation Trials, it's almost, you might as well just read that because it flows very well. One of the things that you see is time and time again, when Saint Joan of Arc was trying to accomplish something, there would be people around them that would delay everything. So there's, and I even beat out of him one time, are you the one that, you know, delayed this and stopped this and that? And he basically said, yeah, he was the one using these people to cause these delays And the ultimate reason was because his hope was then the English could move into the proper places or what have you, get their armies where they needed to, so that the French would be defeated. So there's that delay now in the election, which I find, when I first saw that, I'm just like, because I deal with this in my, as an exorcist all the time, where demons delay your work or put up these blockages so that you can't get things done. Another thing that I find very fascinating is that in the life of Joan of Arc, they asked her, "Are you afraid of anything?" And she said, "Treason," which I found very interesting. The bishop who basically, tried her illegitimately, put her to death, and then made sure none of her relics or anything was ever available. His sin essentially was treason through ambition. He sold out his own country through the ambition because he wanted a bigger bishopric. And so you're seeing this kind of thing even in our own culture, where certain people in positions of power are very, very ambitious. And from that arises a certain treason because they want to obtain certain things and they're willing to sell out the country in order to obtain it. France was occupied by the English. We're occupied by the deep state. I mean, that's basically what we're dealing with.
Right.
And the English thought that they had a right to rule over France. And so do the elite. And so do the communists. They think they have a right to rule. So there's the parallels in the life of St. Joan of Arc are pretty stark. At the end, when she was being tried, Joan was essentially alone. She felt alone. There's even times when you read her biography that she was actually, even between battles, she would feel very much alone because essentially, I always tell people, it's pretty bad when it takes a woman to man up the French, right? So, but to go to war. But the point being is that she was alone, and now we've got a situation where it looks like Trump is alone. So even those who appear to be with her during her life were very often the ones delaying things and sabotaging things and trying to derail it. And you actually see that even with Trump throughout the course of his presidency, and even now, there's the people that should be supporting him are the ones that are derailing it. The deep state wants to impose an alternative form of government. That's exactly what the English wanted to do. They wanted to basically maintain and expand their control over France. St. Joan was sold out by a Frenchman. Trump was very often sold out by the same people in his party. Just as the bishop put St. Joan in jail and disposed of her relics, the deep state will be extraordinarily vindictive. I predicted this a week ago. I said, if these people actually win, the retaliation is going to be diabolic in nature. It's going to be brutal. And we're already seeing that with some of the statements made by one of the congresswomen that, they should start keeping track of these and making lists of people and this and that. These people are out for blood now.
The chilling effect.
There's a certain yeah, it has exactly. So the point being is that it's when you look at the life of St. Joan of Arc, very often during even the battles, when she would be in battle, she might be back a little bit in the, very often she was the one at the forefront, but sometimes she would be back a little bit in the ranks, but then the guys would start like not advancing as quickly as they should. And then she would go up to the front and start forging forward. And so in a similar fashion, and so she would encourage them to keep fighting forward, keep going forward. I tell people, look, now is not the time to cower. Now is not the time to just give up and say, okay, we can't do anything. It's true that we can't really do too much on the external political level. That is true. And that's probably not our place, most of us. Especially as priests, we're not supposed to be doing that. But at least in relationship with the laity, there's only certain things that they can do in the public sector, given their state in life. Now, some can do a lot, some can't. But what this means is that now is the time to be like St. Joan of Arc. That is, we have to make the final push. And what this means is that it's not just a matter of abandoning doing anything. Because I even saw this. People stopped praying. Some people actually stopped praying. It's like, oh, well, there's no point. It's just it looks like the election's already been decided and things of that sort. And I just tell them, look, now is the time to start fighting. Now is the time to buckle down in prayer. Now is the time to basically man up. And if you're a woman, it's time to become a strong woman. It's time to start praying, fasting, doing those things we need necessary, because in a certain sense, I've talked to people who are very high level in our government, that literally work at the highest levels in some of the parts of Washington. And they have told me that the deep state is so pervasive, it's so extensive, and has gotten so much power over the last 30 to 40 years that it's unlikely that even Trump could get the thing rooted out, at least in one term. And so, but what that tells us is, okay, that just looks like it did with the English when it looked like when Joan couldn't, or the French couldn't conquer them. Joan would actually literally start climbing the walls of the castle in order to storm it. I mean, she would literally start doing those things. That's how she got injured once. So the point being is that we can't sit and let this thing pass us by and do nothing. Yeah, there's one person. There's only one person that can change this thing. I mean, it is insurmountable on the side of man. It is not insurmountable on the side of God, and He can still deliver us from 4 years of brutal, oppressiveness. Because that's what's actually coming, and retaliation, things of that sort. He can deliver it from us, but we have to be willing to do our part if we expect Him to do His part.
I'm so glad to hear you talking like this, Father, because I didn't confer with you before I wrote this, and actually Doug fed me this line. He helped me recall about Emperor or Admiral Yamamoto of Japan after they bombed Pearl Harbor. And the classic quote is, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and filled him with terrible resolve." And I have that right now, and I am doing whatever I can. I know you do too, Doug. I know you do, Father. But we're doing everything we can to say, and you're talking about Joan of Arc. I always tell the women, I love the expression "Joan up." You said "man up." It's Joan up. And let's get out of the fetal position, okay? And let's do what we can do. With man, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible, okay? And so what are we called to do right now? We're called to get strong in God's grace.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's the force that will be reckoned with, because, you can think of all kinds of images, but the most classic is probably David and Goliath, All he had was a sling and a stone, right? But with God, you can have this insurmountable force coming at you. And you pull out your rosary and you can say, "I like the odds." God's God is stronger than the devil.
The other thing is that the people on the other side are taking this as a spiritual warfare. Look at I'm sure you've read the stories about the witches actually doing witchcraft, or they're cursing Trump, trying to stop the actual. That, Father.
We've been playing the St. Patrick Larica prayer every time they're doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to make some suggestions about what people can do but it basically means that the demons are inciting people to do things to affect, so that he can be empowered to affect the outcome of the election. Right. Because ultimately he wants his country communist. And there is a reason why our Lord chose Our Lady to be the one to counter communism, because its psychology is entirely diabolic. This is why she was the one chosen by God to be the one to ultimately undo it. This is why we have to ultimately go to her, which I'll make some suggestions about, some prayers here in a little bit. But she's the one that's going to be the one that God's going to use as the instrument to crush us. Let's not forget, the United States is under the patronage of the Immaculate Conception.
Yay. Yes.
We should be fleeing to her and say, "Take back your country."
That's right.